the Satmar community presents itself as a continuation of a pre-war way of life, but it's actually very new. The ideology behind the community is new. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and they raised me, and they joined the sect after the war, and they lived, I would say, traditional Jewish lives before the war, but not by any means extremists or fundamentalists. And it's hard to separate the misogyny from the religious patriarchy and from the trauma-based ideology. So it's all kind of connected. So this is a community founded by Holocaust survivors, led by a very charismatic leader who believed that the Holocaust was a punishment for assimilation, for political integration and emancipation. And he wanted to recreate the ghetto in America. And he wanted us to live a very new and extreme interpretation of Jewish law as a means of appeasing a God angry enough to cause the Holocaust. And women were very central in this strategy because he felt that it was important to replace all the lives that had been lost by bringing as many children into the world as possible. But this was also a political strategy because in this sense, the community can increase its numbers and therefore its political power because the community votes as a bloc. And especially, for example, in a country like Israel, the religious communities have increased demographically so much more quickly than the secular that we have seen in the last decades how deeply influenced the politics has become by religious ideology and by biblical law. And so in a sense, the goal of the ultra-Orthodox in general, where Satmar has also played a role, an influential role, is to both replace what has been lost, but also to become the most powerful force in Jewish society. And to do that, women have to be absolutely controlled, and they have to be sort of like bringing children into this world from the moment that they're fertile until the very, the end of their fertile years as frequently as possible. And they also have to do the work, not only in raising the children and managing the household, but in general, they have to perform the labor that is required to maintain human existence so that the men are free to perform spiritual work. And it's presented as a deal, in the sense that if women do the labor, they will get 50% of the reward in heaven, right? This is the contract. And so the men go to synagogue and study, and the women work and manage the household and raise the children. But they have actually no say in the forming of their children's minds and hearts. They are there to care for the children physically. And what you said to me, what you said to the audience right now, where you said the marriage age was reduced to 9, in my community, we marry quite young, not nearly as young, but we marry young. And I've always felt that one of the reasons why women are married off young, where I come from, is that it's so important for them not to have a chance to question, to doubt, to think about what else they might want. It's so important to entrap them completely in their lives, especially with children. I mean, there is no greater trap, in a sense, for women than having children, because they become the priority. And if you cannot guarantee their safety and their well-being, nothing else is worth it. And so children become the leverage with which the community controls women once they're married off and reach adulthood. But even until then, they are so tightly controlled, not because the religion necessarily demands it. I don't think any of the laws I grew up with were in any way entrenched in any kind of religious text. I mean, there were all these very extraneous details, like stockings, for example. The rabbi was sort of famous for testing the stockings on his own arm to see if they were thick enough. There was a lot of attention paid to details, which I think is a great method of distraction. Like, I think if you're obsessed with the thickness of tights or the length of skirts, you can kind of distract from bigger ideas like what is threatening about a woman's body, And
if the tights were not thick enough, what would happen?
They were made thicker. So in my childhood, the tights became thicker over time. Tight thickness is measured in deniards. So the deniards just kept going up. And the same thing happened with skirt lengths. Like when I found this photo of my aunts when they were little, I noticed that their skirts were like just above the knee, and I freaked out and I ran into the kitchen. I was like, "Oh my God, I found a photo of our aunts with like immodest skirts." And she looked at it and she was like, "Oh no, back then it was allowed." Because when I was going to school, it had to be 10 centimeters below the knee, and it was like such a clear line, and I felt it was so immovable. 10 centimeters, that is the law. But it wasn't the law. It was arbitrary. It could change all the time. It had no basis in anything. And so I feel like my adolescence was suffused with a lot of random, almost meaningless obsessions with measurements and thicknesses, because we were kept so busy with policing ourselves. We never really thought why we were policing ourselves.
And you say policing ourselves, but were you already also policing others, and were others policing you? And was it men, was it women, was it all?
Oh no, we definitely all policed each other. One of the reasons I never had friends when I was growing up is it was too dangerous. Because no friendship was holy enough to prevent that attitude from being reproduced. So there was no possibility of trusting somebody else. It was either have friends and risk being outed when you did something wrong, or just completely withdraw. And so it's of course it makes sense now in retrospect. Women shouldn't be friends with each other, right? Because
it's dangerous. Yes.
So we weren't really allowed to have any relationships.
Maryam, how do you listen to this? I see you nodding a lot.
Well, I mean, I think even if you come from different religious backgrounds, there are so many similarities, isn't it? Because I think, personally, I feel all religions are patriarchal. All religions are obsessed with women's bodies, and that whole idea of spending all this time measuring and making sure that it fits in with what is permissible is something that occupies a lot of women a lot of the time, until they begin to break free and resist. And it is interesting because when you look at all religious texts, there is this idea that women are a deviant form of men. They are a baser form of men. They are weak. They are dangerous. And if you look at texts, for example, in Islam, Muhammad says, Islam's prophet says that, in hell, it's mainly women who are there. So it's a great place to be. I mean, I'd like to go there if there is one. You have, in the Jewish tradition, there's this prayer where men thank God that they were not born women. In Christianity, women are seen to be the gateway to the devil. In the Hindu religion, women, there's the Manu laws, which are famous Indian scripts, where women are seen to be, all of them are seen to be prostitutes. And in Buddhist text as well, it's about how women prevent men from reaching spirituality, the highest form of spirituality. So in all religions, you see how perfectly useful it is for patriarchy. It's the best form of patriarchy, because it's not just your father or your husband or the state telling you, but God himself is telling you, so you better pay attention, because it's so dangerous to transgress those rules. So I think when you see that, you do see the solidarity amongst those who have gone through it and who've come out the other side, possibly very broken, traumatized. I see that a lot amongst ex-Muslims.
What is so traumatizing about it?
Well, there's a lot of control and fear. Deborah mentioned this idea of policing yourself all the time. You know how tiring that is, constantly policing yourself, making sure you're dressed appropriately, having everyone telling you that you're not towing the line. There's a lot of pressure, constant pressure. And the thing is that there's a lot of things that can be made invisible in society. What you think can be invisible to some extent unless you speak out. You know, even maybe being gay, you can possibly hide it. You can hardly hide being a woman, you know, and because women are the first target of religion and the religious right, they make a point of making sure that you're controlled and that you're managed. It's their way of asserting their power. It's their way of showing that they are in charge. Because if they are in charge of the women, they are in charge, you know. And so I think that's why it's such, I think, so inspiring, so moving, so human to see the great women's liberation movements in countries under Islamic rule, from Iran to the women in Afghanistan standing up to the Taliban, to Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, women fighting against the Sharia code in the family law. So, you know, I think women's liberation comes particularly in the fight against religion. And if there are any gains, it is because there has been that challenge to religion, because there has been that challenge to dogma, and because there has been a deep criticism of religion. I know in a lot of situations we're labeled Islamophobic, or we're told that we're, you know, going too far, we don't respect religion. Well, I won't respect an idea that considers me half a human being. I will not respect an idea that considers women to be, you know, prostitutes and who are there to, who are inferior and who are debased. You know, and in that sense, it is a great disrespect to women to expect us to have any respect for religion and religious laws.